Okay, shall we start?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So, all right. So thank you for coming, the three participants, and maybe Rafti Feret, and maybe her sweet daughter. What I'd like to talk to you about is a case called Jonathan Danilowitz versus El Al. El Al, as you know, is Israel's aviation company. El Al means going up. And now, this is a case. Let me tell you about the case and the outcome of the case and then analyze it, okay? So that you know what the result was before we get into the analysis. So this is a case about gay, the entitlement of gay people to benefits from their employers in Israel. That's what it's about. Do gay people have entitlements to benefit? Meaning, if the employer gives benefits to married couples or to couples who are common law couples, meaning they've been living together for a long time, having a household, but not married, okay? If the employer gives benefits to this type of people, to these categories of people, then the question is, does the employer also have to give the same benefits to gay people who also live together as husband and wife, okay, or as spouses, or as lovers? That's the question. The question is, what is the obligation of the employer when the couple is not heterosexual, but rather gay? That's the question. And the court decided, now, what is the benefit that we are talking about? The benefit that we are talking about is that El Al, the aviation company, Israel's airline company, gives very nice benefits to its employees, including free tickets, airplane tickets. So if you work for El Al for, I think, at least 2 years, you are entitled to a free ticket to, go with your significant others to India or to Paris or wherever it is that you want to go at the expense of El Al. El Al will give you the ticket. So here we had a guy, his name is Jonathan Danilowitz. In America, you would call him Danilowitz, but my friends in Israel, when I say Danilowitz, they look at me as if I'm, something is wrong with me. They say the case is Danilowitz. So remember that. So it's Danilowitz in Israel, Danilowitz in the United States. And he was a flight attendant, Danilowitz, Jonathan. He was a flight attendant. He was born in South Africa, spoke fluent English, came to Israel, made Aliyah, met a guy. They fell in love. They moved in together. They bought an apartment together, and they held a regular household like other spouses. So one day, Jonathan decided he worked for El Al. Jonathan worked for El Al. He was a flight attendant, and he wanted a ticket for his partner. He went to El Al, he asked for the ticket, and El Al said, no, we can't give tickets to people who are gay. We don't give tickets to people who live together, who are not of opposite sexes. We don't do that. And now, okay, let me go forward to the end of the story, and then we will come back to discuss the litigation, because it's slightly, there are some juicy parts to it, not too many, and the law that underlies it. So the El Al staged a real bitter fight against gays and the gay couple, the concept of gayness in employment law. They invested a lot of resources, okay, in fighting this couple and fighting this guy Danilowitz, and they lost in the Supreme Labor Court, so they went to the Supreme Court of Israel, They lost in the Supreme Court of Israel. Then they went for another round of litigation, and they wanted the court to reconsider the case, meaning El Al was very, very committed to the anti-gay principle, which is a question that, it's for you to reflect on. What is going on here? Why? Okay? Why were they so insistent on it? And that was not such a long time ago. That was in the 90s, okay? In the beginning of the 20th century. So the question is, what is it that they had against gays? Now, today, this case, Danilowitz, where the court held that gay people are entitled to all benefits equally that the employer gives to heterosexual people, this is a case that everybody accepts. We take it for granted. It's a principle that we accept. And it's considered to be one of the landmark cases in Israel. Like you think about Brown v. Board of Education, or as far as gays are concerned, you may think about Lawrence versus Texas, the gay case where gay intimate relations were recognized, or Obergefell, where the Supreme Court of the United States recognized gay marriage. This case is of the same power and of the same level, normative level in Israel. It's a very, very important case. And in the Supreme Court of Israel, there is a museum dedicated to cases, landmark cases, and they list 21 cases that were most important cases in Israeli legal history. And this case, Danilowitz, is one of them, okay? It's so important in terms of changing social mores and understandings about gay people. So this is the background of the case. Would you like me to stop here? Do you have any questions?
Well, it's really interesting.
Okay. So now, let me first focus on what did El Al have to say. It's not really clear what is it that fueled their fury here. Why is it that they were? This costs a lot of money. This kind of litigation. Why were they prepared to go all the way, several rounds, in order to win their case? I do not know. And I asked a few of my friends in Israel who wrote about this case and are expert on this case. And I asked, is it possible at all that in El Al, among the employees, there are so many gays, okay, that they did not want to give benefits to so many people. So they decided this was a good way to deny benefits. But my friends say, no, they don't have that many gay people, okay? This is not it, okay? It was for them a matter of principle. And the question that you may want to think about is, what is the principle that was nurturing this case? So the only thing that we know, now, of course, bias against gays is the clear answer. I'm going to leave this aside. But the legal counsel of El Al, when he first saw the case, when the case came before him, before they decided, because what El Al had in its charter, El Al stated that it's giving benefits to people who are married or to people who are common law couples, meaning people who are known to be married or living together, even though there was no court of law that recognized the marriage. That was the legal definition from the perspective of El Al, okay? And El Al said, common law couples do not include gay same-sex couples, do not, okay? Now, the legal counsel of El Al, Amram Bloom, who reviewed the case and made a statement about the justifications for it, said the following, and I want to hear what you have to say about it. If a goat and a man were living together, could the goat come, to El Al and ask for a ticket? If you give the goat a ticket, you would also give the spouse a ticket. That was his example. You know that in law, we argue by example, right? That's the way we do it. So the example that he gave is gay people are like goats, right? So I want to know what you think about it. I see, and when you think about it, I will give you another example of what the American Supreme Court said many years ago, when it also denied the rights of gay people for intimate relationship, for constitutional protection. And I think what I would like to do first, before I tell you what the law said, I would like to have a little discussion about this kind of reasoning. What makes a man think that that a gay man and another gay man who live together are like a man and a goat? What makes him think that they are like a man and a goat? And I want to compare this to the Supreme Court of the United States in 1994, I think it was, in a very famous case called Bowers versus Hardwick, where the Supreme Court of the United States denied the right of gay people to intimate relationship. This case later was overturned by the Supreme Court, but at that time the court said gay people do not have a right to intimate relationship. And if the state, in that particular case, it was the state of Georgia, if the state wants to put them in jail, that's okay. If the state wants to criminalize their intimacy, that's okay. That was the court held. And the court said, from the pen of Justice White, who in other matters was liberal, Justice White said, the Constitution of the United States does not confer the right to perform sodomy. Okay, you want to think about it? The Constitution of the United States does not confer the right to perform sodomy. And the question is this similar to saying, if a goat and a man came before the court and the goat wanted a ticket, would we say that it is entitled to a ticket? Is it similar? Or you can think about this differently. How do you feel, okay, when a senior person in law says to you, you want the right to perform sodomy. That's what you want, okay? Not you want the right to your dignity, not you want the right to your personal autonomy. You want the right to perform sodomy. The Constitution doesn't give you such a right, okay? Or in the Israeli case to say, you want a right to a ticket? El Al doesn't give goats ticket. Goodbye, okay? It doesn't give goats tickets, it doesn't give dogs tickets, it doesn't give cats tickets, only people. And therefore, what's the implication? You are not a person, you're a goat, right? So my question to you is, what do you think of this? Do you think these issues are similar, these statements are similar? Yes, Diane.
No. Do you want to speak first? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Please. Well, Ken, you wanted to say, yeah. I didn't raise your hand so that I can
That's all right. Oh, there we go. No, I don't think they're similar at all. In one case, well, I was going to get there. In one case, you're talking about two men who are obviously human beings, and you're not saying one is an animal, one is a person, or both are animals. Neither is persons. The other, you're just making a totally ridiculous argument, which is that because gay people may perform sex acts that some people might consider sodomy, therefore you're not even a person, you're an animal. I mean, it's just, they're both horrible examples, but at least in one case, you're basically saying we're not going to recognize certain rights that gay people think they might have. In the other, you're not even being eloquent about it. You're just simply saying, this is like allowing animals to vote. So I don't superficially there's an analogy, but fundamentally, in one case you're denying the humanity of.
In both cases, you deny the humanity.
Yeah, I suppose, but it. As I say, maybe it's semantics, but at least you're not referring to the people directly as animals and making it so. Because I also know, of course, that Georgia case was overturned very quickly. It wasn't like we waited 50 years to reverse Roe versus Wade. That case was reversed, I don't know, maybe 10 years later in the Texas case.
Okay, but okay. But don't forget that the gay movement did a lot of work before they got it.
Yeah.
You see, so it was not simple.
Well, that's my first comment. I had other comments, but let Diane talk. And and others, and then I'll come back.
Okay.
Well, I think law is still a product of the times. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I think
Right.
that it took a long time for the gay movement to normalize gay relationships, that we forget what the picture of gay male relationships in particular were. And I think they were considered inhuman because the notion was that heterosexual sex was the norm and what human beings did. So anything like gay male sex, which has had very, very hard implications, I think, in our society, it was considered abnormal. And I think that comparing it to a goat is making that analogy. This is abnormal, this is inhuman, and they're actually equal. And that was the world, I think, in which gay rights was initially, that was the battle of gay rights, was how do you normalize this relationship?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Debbie, you want to say something?
I mean, like the minute you said it, I was absolutely like mortified. And then like, as we were going on, it was like this flashback of like, oh my goodness, if those laws were on the books and those court cases were there, and if we go backwards, they're just going to be cited again and again. So a bit of terror, I guess, and horror.
Yeah. So, so but you see, the reaction of the court and also the reaction of the legal counsel, Amram Bloom, when he was talking about a union between a goat and a man, which also reminds me, I wonder if there is a relationship here to the old story about the rabbi, who a man came to him to complain that he has two small quarters and a big family, and the rabbi say, bring a goat into the house. Okay, and after a little while, he says, take the goat out of the house, and he takes the goat out of the house, and one suddenly feels that there is a lot of room and that there is enough, space for them. So I wonder if there is a relationship here. If he were thinking about it, Amram Bloom, I know that he's a religious person, and that's another thing that I want to flag is, was it his religiosity, okay, that made the difference? But I'm leaving this aside right now. It's a very interesting question. One of the things that you see here when he says, would the goat also be entitled to a ticket? It's designed to put down the entire claim, okay? It's designed to put down to cheapen, okay, and vulgarize a claim that for Danilowitz was a very important claim for his autonomy and self-respect. So instead of coming to him and saying, okay, you are entitled to autonomy, self-respect, let's think about it. Maybe you're not entitled, but let's think about it. To respond with, you are like a goat, is a way of putting down the entire claim. That is, and that's the essence of the insult here, okay? Whereas also in the American case, saying the Constitution of the United States doesn't give you a right to perform sodomy. Yes, the Constitution of the United States doesn't talk about the way in which you do sex, okay? So it doesn't give you this right, it doesn't give you other rights to perform sex in different positions. It has nothing to do with the case, okay? And as the dissent said to Justice White at the time, in this case, Bowers versus Hardwick, was what you are doing is you are taking the claim of the gay community, and you are lowering it to the level of a detailed sexual act, okay? What you really need to do is to think about the generality of the case, okay? The constitutional claim is not to perform sodomy or not to perform sodomy. The constitutional claim is to be let alone, not to be interfered with in your activities, which they called the right to be let alone. So we are talking here, what the court was saying, the dissent was saying, we are talking about the level of generality. If we want to insult the claimant, okay, or the petitioner, we will lower their claim to a particular activity. We will say sodomy, we will say goat, but if we want to respect it, we will lift it, we will generalize about the claim, and we will say what we are talking here about actually is the right to be let alone. Don't go and interfere. Don't ask questions. Don't push the person to tell you exactly what they are doing, because it's none of our business. Just sheer respect for the humans. Yes, Debbie, please.
So is that legal premise both in Israel and the United States, or is it just generic to Israel?
What do you mean?
Like how you said, generalizing it, that.
How do we generalize?
No, I mean, like the case took place in Israel. So that's according to Israeli law. Would that concept hold?
Okay, yes. So this is a very good question. So I sort of took you in another direction, but let me come back to your question. Okay, which is a good question. So the question is, what did the court base its decision on? How did the court come to the conclusion that Mr. Danilowitz was entitled to the ticket and that Mr. Danilowitz should be recognized as a member of the union with another man? That's what the court held. The court said, these guys live together, they claim that they are a couple and they prove that they behave as a couple, and that's good enough for us. We do not go further than that. Okay, it's good enough for us. That's what the Israeli court said. The American court, in that particular case that I quoted to you before, did not say that. But several years later, the court said that case, the first case, was a mistake. Bar versus Hardwick. We made a mistake. We did not understand the Constitution properly. And we are saying now, okay, in a case called Texas versus Johnson, what we are saying now is that gay people are entitled to their dignity and autonomy just like any other person. So it doesn't matter if you are gay or not gay. If you decide to be a part of a couple, that's your right and your business, and it's not for the court to decide if you can do it or not. Okay, so that was the holding of the Supreme Court in the United States. And as Diane said, it took a long time. It's not, it didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of thinking to do that. Okay, so did you have further questions here, Debbie? Yes, you want to ask a further question?
You clarified it, thank you.
Okay, so now the question is, so now, what did we see? We saw the case, right? We saw how El Al tried to defend itself and deny the rights of gays. And we saw the result. The result was the court said to El Al, you must give the same benefits to gay people as you give to heterosexual people. Okay, that is the case. That's the significance of the case. Now you will ask me, on the basis of what? That's what we always ask in law. On the basis of what did the court decide that gay people have a right? On the basis of what? That's the question. Because in Israel, there is no law that says that gay people are entitled to rights, okay? And actually in Israel also, the status of equality is quite precarious. So what did the court do? The court did two things. It based its holding on two laws. One law and two laws, and that's important for you, for those of you who are interested in Israeli constitutional history. Both of these laws came at the end of the 90s, just before the 21st century, at the end of the 90s, and they came from an Israel that was very liberal. So if you look today at Israel, you see an illiberal Israel, right? Israel is not a liberal state right now, and actually parliament right now, the Knesset would not be so enthusiastic about recognizing gay rights, okay? Because the religious parties are against it. But in the 90s and the beginning of the 21st century, there was considerable enthusiasm for liberalization of the system. And so what happened in Israel at the end of the 90s and the beginning of the 21st century is that, first of all, the old statute that came from England that criminalized gay behavior, gay activity, was abolished, okay? That happened in 1988, okay? And that was a very important first step. And if you want to think about it, a part of it was as a result of the gay movement in the United States, that affected and influenced the gay movement in Israel, okay? So that's one thing. There was the statute that prohibited gay behavior was abolished, was repealed. The next important thing is, as the case was coming before the court, as the case was litigated, a statute was passed by Parliament, which at the time was liberal. Remember that. And I want you to remember it because the Parliament can change. Like you see that we are going to have an election in Israel in the coming months, right?
Yeah.
If the religious parties are in power, none of this will happen, okay? Because the religious parties are not in favor of liberal relations among couples. So in those days, in the late 90s, a law was going forward called the Equal Opportunity in Employment Law, Equal Opportunity in Employment. And what that law held, among other things, that an employer is not allowed to discriminate against employees on the basis of their sexual orientation. Okay, so the law says, I'll just repeat it, that an employer like El Al is not permitted to discriminate against employees on the basis of their sexual orientation. In addition to this statute, there was one more important statute on the books that was passed in 1992. So all of this you see happened in the 90s. There was another very important statute, and that is a statute called Basic Law, Human Dignity and Freedom, which is more or less like the Israeli Bill of Rights. Not exactly, but similar, okay? So the human dignity and freedom talks about human dignity. And what the Supreme Court of Israel said, human dignity, that means equality, among other things, okay? So that people should be always treated equally. And so the court had these two statutes, one statute saying people are entitled to human dignity, and another statute saying the employer is not allowed to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. And the court took these two statutes and said, Mr. Danilowitz, on the basis of these two statutes, is entitled to the ticket, is entitled to recognition, that's the important point, of his relationship with his spouse, with his partner, okay, to validation of this relationship. And the validation of this relationship brings about his entitlement to the ticket. Meaning, just as married couples are entitled to free tickets from El Al, okay, so the wife, if the husband works for El Al, is entitled to a ticket. So in the same way, the partner of the gay marriage, gay relationship is also entitled to the ticket. That was the holding. And as I told you before, this holding did not go easily because El Al fought tooth and nail against it. Okay, they put a lot of money into the litigation. Okay, they opposed it, but eventually they lost. Now, what happened after the loss is very important, after the case, because at that moment it was like all the gates were opened. Okay, and gay rights were recognized. Okay, so gay rights in Israel were recognized in many areas. Okay, including, for example, in the military, okay? So if before this case, if a person was gay, the military would not give them access to sensitive intelligence information on account of their gayness. After this case, the military opened its gate, okay? Opened its rank, and it didn't matter if you were gay or not, okay? If you were eligible and you qualified, you would get the benefit, okay, the access to intelligence, and so on and so forth. And now, let me make a little other point that might interest you before we go forward. I don't know where my watch is. Okay, so we don't have much time. I think we have 5 more minutes to go. The question of marriage. Marriage is a very complicated issue in Israel, okay? In Israel, only Jews can marry Jews, period, okay? And what they mean by Jews is not Reform Jews or conservative Jews. They mean Jews either who were born Jewish or who converted in an Orthodox conversion, okay? So the question of marriage in Israel is very sensitive and very difficult. What people do generally in order to get married, who are not strictly Jewish and know that the rabbinical courts will not let them get married, what they do is they go abroad. So for example, they can go to Cyprus, that's very popular, or they can go to, you know, no matter what, you know, whatever country, France, get married there, get a certificate that they are married, and then when you get back to Israel, you show your certificate and you ask to be registered as married, okay? And the rabbinical court for a while rejected this idea. They said, if you are not, if the two couples are not, if the members of the couple are not Jewish, we are not going to recognize it. But the Supreme Court held otherwise. And the Supreme Court said it's not the business of the person who writes down the marriage situation status. It's not his business to ask you if you are married to a Jew or not, okay? If you say that you are married to a Jew, that's good enough for him, okay, or her. So as a result, what happens is that the Ministry of Interior in Israel is actually compelled to recognize certificates from abroad of marriage. So for example, if a gay couple in Massachusetts get married and they go to Israel and they show their certificate, the Ministry of Interior, kicking and screaming, must recognize it and write down that you are married, okay? They don't like it, but they have to do it. Debbie, I see that you have a question.
No, I was just reflecting that I need to leave and I can't wait to hear the recording because this is fascinating.
Okay, so what you see actually, and I will end here. First of all, you see the significance of the case, okay? That the case opened the gates to the recognition and validation of gay marriage, gay activity in Israel, okay? Of gay autonomy in Israel, of gay dignity in Israel, and that makes a big difference, okay? Number one. Number two, what it shows you is the way by which Israeli society is also changing, okay? Responding to the Supreme Court and to the holding, okay? The Israeli law is also changing. So for example, in Israel, you still cannot get married unless you are Jewish to another Jewish person of another sex, okay? But there are ways around it, okay? That the court devises and that people invent in order to get what they want, such as, for example, a marriage certificate. And similarly in Israel, I'll end here, if you know, I have several friends who are gay men, very eminent professors, and they want to have children, they are married, or they live together, whatever, and they want to have children. So it used to be that the Israeli government would not permit you to get a child through surrogacy if you are gay. So if you are a gay couple, the government would not allow you to engage in surrogacy relations, okay, and beget a child, okay? But now this has changed as a result of this case, Danilowitz. As a result of this case, anybody in Israel, a gay couple who wants to have a child, can go through surrogacy. I know there are surrogacy enterprises in Georgia, okay? And I know that there are surrogacy enterprises we know in India, and in other places, they welcome you It costs about $150,000, so it's good business, and they provide you, help you beget a child.
Mm.
So that's, so that's where we are right now. So I will let people ask one last question, and we will call it a day.
Pnina, I had a question.
Please.
And I'm willing to stay a few minutes if you want, since we got started so late. But my question is, when this case came to the lawyer for LL, this issue came to him, were these two laws that you mentioned already on the books?
No.
One,
No, one law was in the book.
which one
law
was on?
was about 10 years old, was on the books, but it was only 10 years old. And
Yeah.
therefore there was not enough, legal input, okay?
Right.
So nobody knew what is gonna happen because the right to equality was not recognized straightforwardly.
Okay.
And the other law that I talked about, which is even more important, the equality in employment law, that
Right.
was being passed as the case was making its way to the Supreme Court,
Oh, okay.
So Pnina,
which was very interesting. Yes, Diane.
so I just go back to the whole issue of Jewish law.
Yeah.
That obviously religious Orthodox law will never, at least at this point, accept gay marriage. You were explaining, and somehow I missed it. What was the intersection with religious law in Israel versus these cases that came up to that are secular?
Well, religion, as you know, it's from TBZ, we see it all the time, right?
Yeah.
When you read the Chumash, you see that there are prohibitions against gay sex, right? So, which are very strong and very explicit. So the rabbis reading this have two choices. They can take it and reinterpret it in soft ways that will include validation and recognition. They can do it, but they don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they feel that actually there is something strange and weird about same-sex relations. That's what they feel. That's why they say a goat and a man.
Yes.
They think that it's a question of education. And it's a question of, coming to accept the different social mores that we see today.
Yes.
I have lots of friends who have, they are nice, open-minded people, quite liberal. But when, I know the cases when the son comes forward and says I'm gay, the parent is shocked. What am I going to say to my neighbors? What will I tell my friends? Okay, it's a terrible thing.
Right.
After a few years, when they get used to it, and they get to meet the partner, and they see that the son is doing very well, they accept it.
Right.
They accepted it, and they live freely with it. They live well with it, but it takes time. It's a question of education. We need to get used to it. It's like a Jew and a Gentile. You're not used to it. You think it's weird, right? It's like biracial marriage. We are not used to it. If we get used to it, we say, okay, it's,
Yeah. Well,
So Pnina, so we just
last
had this.
comment.
Yeah, we just had this terrible decision overturning Roe versus Wade, and a number of the other decisions right around it. That my own opinion is that the 6-person majority of the Supreme Court is now acting more like the Catholic Church than it is a court, because each of these rulings has an aspect of religiosity to it that is just, frightening. But I don't want to get into that debate. What I'm asking, I guess, is if it's so easy for a majority of the Supreme Court to take an established ruling like Roe versus Wade and say it was wrongly decided, even after 2 or 3 generations of women had relied on it, and throw it out based on their reading of the Constitution. In Israel, where you don't have a constitution, but you have these 2 or maybe 3 very strong laws you talked about, is in some way, is Israel, does it have a stronger basis for holding on to some of these fundamental rights that have been established than we do, because while they don't have the Constitution, they have these laws, and it's not always easy to repeal laws.
Yeah, first of all, in Israel, it's very easy to repeal laws.
It is. Okay.
Yeah, you just need a small majority.
So do you think that the laws that underlie this case that you talked about, could those easily be repealed such that, you know, the next time around, this lawyer could say, no, you've got no rights, you're like a goat?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I mentioned it before, and I would like you to think of it, because I think it's an important point.
Yeah.
We are going to have an election in Israel in a few months.
Right.
And the newspapers at least predict that the religious parties will win big. Okay, that there is going to be a big religious party, which is very right-wing religious party, not because religion can be open-minded and liberal, and can be also that this is going to be a conservative religious party, is what the newspapers predict. Okay, the polls predict, and if they do, then they can pass a law. Why not? Because there are a lot of people in Israel who are against gays.
Right.
Okay.
But there must be a lot of money that would be raised to sustain these laws, I would think, right? I mean,
the law against or the law in favor?
The law in favor.
I'm not so sure.
No.
The more money you put into in behalf of gays, the more money will come against gays. You know, it's if it's a competition of money, you know, I'm not sure. I'm not so sure who's going to win. I don't know.
So that's frightening.
I do want to emphasize that this is actually, it's about money, but it's not only about money. What it shows you is that the Israelis actually were more open-minded. More open-minded. Just like they are more open-minded about abortion. You want to have an abortion, get an abortion. Okay, it's not the business of the state.
I thought the laws were pretty strict about abortion, though.
Huh?
I thought the laws in Israel were fairly strict about abortion.
No, the laws in Israel, first of all, they are not strict. They are not strict. They are not at all. We can talk about it, Diane, but I assure you, they are not strict.
Yeah.
And the laws in Israel with regard to gays now, I mean, with regard to gays now, is you are a free person, do whatever you want, as long as you don't hurt anybody else. If you don't violate the law, you don't rape anybody, okay? You don't seduce young children, okay? You don't rape anyone, you are entitled. You are entitled to do it in the way that you want to do it. No problem.
But you're saying that could go with this next election, that could all go down the drain. That could all.
I don't know, down the drain. I don't like to say down the drain because things, you know, I mean, it's much more complex than that. Right. But it can be bad. It can be bad because the religious parties can be strong enough to pass laws that, you know, that deny equality. And then there's going to be a fight. But what I do want to say, and I think it's true also with regard to abortion, what I do want to say is that the Israelis proved, and I saw it many times, very, very tolerant of gay relations. And very understanding that it's not their business, and it's not the business of the state to tell you, you know, how to conduct your personal life.
Well,
and I know, I mean, in the law school, there are, you know, the law school is full of gay people.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So interesting that a country that has got a orthodoxy that is the official, you know, religious branch, not branch of the government, but that is official, unlike in the United States where we don't have an official religion. It's interesting that they're more tolerant of things like abortion and gay rights than we are, where supposedly, you know, we don't have an official religion. But that's the thing that scares me, is we're becoming more like, you know, the Supreme Court is looking more like the Taliban than it is.
It's
maybe
true. The Supreme Court is actually becoming more like the Taliban.
It is. I mean, you had, it wasn't just this one case, it wasn't the abortion case. They also had several cases on religion where, for instance, they allowed, you know, they said that the state can't interfere with a coach of a football team praying and literally requiring his football team, the students to show up, or there's a lot of,
Yeah.
a lot
Okay,
of
so this is
implicit,
another question, so let's
Yeah.
leave it.
well, we'll leave it, but I'm just saying, it
Yeah.
looks like
Yeah,
we're
the Supreme
becoming more
Court of the United
Talibanic.
States right now is religious. Most of them
Yeah.
are Catholic.
Yeah,
Most of them are practicing Catholic. That's the important point.
right.
And I think they do not see the high wall separating church and state. They don't see it.
Not at all. Not at
So
all.
that's what it's about.
Yeah, it's well,
And what it's
another
about is vote. The same in
vote,
Israel, the same here.
Yeah, except we
It's
can't
only
vote
the
for.
people can save themselves from
Yeah.
this.
No, you're right. You're right.
All right.
All right, this
So
is a
thank you
great
very much.
conversation. Thank you so
I
much.
just want to say thank you so much, Pnina. Again, my apologies to everyone. I thought it was going to be open and I could come in. But I always love listening to you teach, and because it just flows through you so seamlessly, we always get so much out of it. And I was sitting here with my evening coffee of igualdad, which is Spanish for social
Very nice.
equality. And so I was very much looking forward to this and learned a lot. So thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you very much, Rav Tiferet. I really appreciate it. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
everyone.
Pnina.
Ken and Diane.
Fascinating.
And
The best in
Debbie.
health to everybody. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's great. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Thank you
Fascinating
for
talk,
coming.
yeah.
Sure. Thank you.